Okay, so this is chapter 14. And remember, this is a seminal book and it's the best for a course like this. That's why I'm reading. And I said this is the first time I'm reading. So let's continue. This is chapter 14. We're going to talk about transparency, and chapter 15, conflict resolution and issue identification. Remember, if you look at the tab here, the tab to your left, you can see the sections of the book. We're under part 3, which is group habits. So how do you function in a group, within a group, as the virtual assistant, chief of staff, or as the CEO? How do you function with the rest of the team? So that's transparency. What should the relationship look like? Should you be open, honest? Certainly. And conflict resolution and issue identification, because that always happens. So how do you figure them out and address them immediately? That's what we're doing in this video. So it says here, your team members are smart. When there are problems, they know it. Hiding negative information from them does not make them feel better. If anything, it makes them more anxious. If you hide, as it says here, negative information, if something has happened and you have a smart, honest person on your team and you do not have that conversation with them, but you have it with someone else, that's going to create a problem, because they'll tell you right to your face, you ought to have had that conversation with me and you ought to have given me a chance to explain myself. So if you have smart people on your team, be honest with them. That's what it says. And as a virtual assistant, I'm looking forward right now. I am watching out for some contracts, and at the end of the day, I'm believing that I'm going to get a really good one. And I know when I get that good one and I'm in a smart team, that you're going to have to share and be honest and be vulnerable sometimes about what you did and what you didn't do well, and have a conversation about how it can be better. So there's absolutely no room for dishonesty when you're working with a smart team, with a great team. There's always the need to be transparent instead. Just as you don't know if your team members will share negative information with you until they do so for the first time, the team members don't know if you are willing to share negative information with them until you do. Our imaginations are much more powerful than reality. Our imaginations are much more powerful than reality. So let's highlight this. Okay. Share all relevant information with your team, both negative and positive. Yeah, that's usually part of feedback. This will give them great comfort and enable them to use their brilliance and talents to adapt. There are only two pieces of information most companies choose not to share openly. The first is compensation. The second is performance reviews, particularly performance improvement plans. Okay, so these are two bits of information that companies usually don't share. So you don't want to share these ones publicly. Public knowledge of these items often causes heated debates, relative comparisons, and even shame, all of which are big distractions. So these are the things we don't want to share with everybody. So conversation and performance reviews. Then, however, there are some companies that choose radical transparency, sharing both of these with success. Such complete sharing should only be done if the entire company is trained in radical transparency. If the entire company is trained in radical transparency. So if you have some people who understand radical transparency and some do not, the ones who do not will make an issue of it with those who understand it and who are okay with seeing such information in the public. So one such training comes from the Conscious Leadership Group, which we're going to do now in chapter 15, Conscious Leadership Group. Yeah, it's a section under chapter 15, conflict resolution and issue identification. So because, as I said, this usually happens, right? So let's just dive straight into how best to handle it. Interpersonal conflict arises often and almost always is due to people. One, people not fully sharing their feelings and thoughts. Two, people not feeling heard when or if they share. There is a laughably simple method to solving this issue. Stephen Covey shared the technique in his iconic The Seven Habits of Highly Effective People. Powerful lessons in personal change. Michael Rosenberg, Michael Rosenberg, codified it in nonviolent communication. Yeah, there's somebody else. Is it not Michael Rosenberg? But there's one other person who has a similar name to this, who is big in the coaching space and consulting space. And I think I'm going to find that and do that course, free course too. So if there's someone you should know when it comes to nonviolent communication, it's Michael Rosenberg. And this was very, very popular in the early 2000s. So let's just underline this and put it here. Okay, let's just put it there. Codified it in nonviolent communication. Oh, let's not do the names. Let's just continue with the books like we started. We just highlight the books. Uh, Nonviolent communication. I haven't read this book, Nonviolent Communication, but I've read a review of it and I've seen it pop up so many times. I just understand what the book is about, and I think I understand one of the two techniques that the book talks about. So the important information it wants to share here about conflict resolution, especially when it revolves around people not feeling heard or not fully sharing. This is being honest again. Remember that transparency we talked about just now in chapter 14. So he wants to do a combination of 7 habits of highly effective people and combine that with something from nonviolent communication. And Chris Voss is someone who has written a book about negotiation. Yeah, I have read something about him from Masterclass. If you do not know Masterclass, let me quickly do that for you. It's an app that has trainings from the biggest names in several industries. So this is a masterclass. So Chris Voss is one of the facilitators, teachers here, and he has taught something on negotiation. So see all 200 plus classes. I used to have a masterclass account myself early when they started. I think that was their first year or second year. And I watched some of these sessions on that account, but I haven't had a masterclass account for about two years now, or maybe 3 years now. And if there's something I could change about my professional development this year, it would be getting a masterclass account. But I still have some resources that I'll go back to and maybe just do another knowledge sharing session on some of those resources. But I've taken 1 or 2 classes from here, and I think I've taken something from Chris Voss as well. So Chris Voss on negotiation, never split the difference. You also want to read this book, Negotiating as if your life depends on it. Chris has been in these like disastrous situations, talking to kidnappers and so on and so forth, like terrorists and so have very high stakes life and death scenarios. So if there's someone you can learn negotiation from, it's Chris Voss. I recommend reading all 3 of these books to get fully immersed in their techniques. But here is a 1,000-foot view. So I wouldn't do a video on the 7 habits of highly effective people because that's already been done. Nonviolent communication is pretty popular, and that's several people, hundreds of people have done videos to amazing length, breaking them down. Not so much about never split the difference. So maybe we might do something on never split the difference. Okay, so most feel hatred for each other because they feel unheard. For me to respect you, I don't need to agree with you. That's what he says. Yeah, and I think that's true. I just respect people, and I always like not to force myself into agreeing with everybody, because what that robs you of is your unique perspective on things. You can respect people but not agree with them on things. Yeah, so I think that's a very good position. It's not as dicey as people think. You just have to respect people, just give people their respect. Because, for example, if you come to Diary of a CEO, okay, um, Diary of a CEO. I was recently watching an episode of Diary of a CEO, and in that episode, it was talking to somebody who was endorsing making money through real estate. But then on this same show, Diary of a CEO, Stephen has interviewed several people. I mean, not one, not two, but several people who have talked about how terrible it is to make money through um, real estate. That you shouldn't buy homes, shouldn't buy a house. You should instead rent and then put your money in stocks. There are people who have said that. But then there's been a guy who has come on recently on the show and said um, that you should have just buy real estate because real estate always or almost certainly usually appreciates, and that you only have natural disasters and war as the two biggest things that cause real estate to depreciate to a point of loss. But usually, if you have real estate, you're going to live there. In fact, he did say one thing that I'm going to quote later on my website. He said, "People don't live in the stock market. I mean, even if you put all your money in the stock market, you're going to live somewhere. So imagine putting all your money in the stock market and watching it grow, but then you're paying rent. And if you pay rent for 10 years, imagine that is way more expensive than if you just bought a house with a cheaper amount of money. So there are people who have had diverse opinions on the show, and I think one of the things that the that Stephen talked about is the possibility of like having all those people come together and debate. So you can be bright, smart, and that's honestly how I feel. You can be bright, smart. Another person can be bright and smart, and you can know things with conviction, and then respect each other. But you still disagree, but just respect each other because you look at the data from different perspectives. But I do not need for you to hear what I have to say. That's what he says. When I tell you my perspective, which I, of course, believe to be right, and you aren't immediately convinced, then I assume that you didn't really hear, understand what I said. If you start sharing your perspective, I will be uncompelled and unwilling to truly listen because you haven't been willing to consider mine. And the circle spirals downward to hate and agreement. So, what he's simply talking about here is saying it from the perspective of someone. So someone might feel that you should have you should allow me speak, and the other person, for example, I usually prefer that when I'm talking with someone and the person is trying to get personal over an issue, I'll just allow them to finish, right? And then when I finish, I just go like, let's just look at data, right? And let's look at it from a point of practical sense. Okay, can we just look at how practically it would be for us to do something in a certain way, and then just agree on the practical reality of that thing, okay, and not be so um, tight on the personal things that we might feel and the sentiment we might have on an issue. It's usually not very easy, but I think the bottom line just comes to like respecting communication. If you respect the other person and you're willing to listen to them, and they respect you too, and they're willing to listen to you, there's a very good chance that that issue would be resolved immediately because it's always a conflict of perspectives. It's sometimes a conflict of sentiments, or sometimes a conflict of perspective and sentiment. But the chances are better if we're both open and honest with each other and are willing to listen. So, Mochary says there's a simple fix. I only need to prove to you that I have heard you. And to do that, I only need to repeat back what you've said, summarized, of course, until you say, that's right. Then you'll feel heard. You'll now be open to hearing what I have to say. So, yeah, this is something really good. and it's something that I'm going to be doing going forward. It says there's a simple fix. I mean, it's really simple. So if someone tells me something, and even if it sounds like something I'm not going to agree with, my first point of action should be to listen. Yeah, just listen. And then when the person is done speaking, I'll summarize what they've said. And then the person says, yes, you've heard exactly what I said. Then once that person confirms that I've heard them, then they feel that they're heard. Then, only then, should I speak, should I say what I think. So it's not just enough for me to like listen. That's what I've just learned from this. That's what I'm taking away from this paragraph. I need to both listen and then echo, repeat to them what they said. And then if I disagree, then I might say, this is on the basis I think you should consider X, Y, and Z, okay, that they did not mention when they spoke. So if I say consider X, Y, and Z, then because they've already heard that, that I understand, that I've heard what they've said, then they might be much more willing to consider the things for which I do not agree with. So I think that's a very brilliant fix. So here is an experiment that proves this principle. The next time you encounter a person who is repeating themselves, stop them and ask if you can state back what they've already said. So instead of allowing someone to go on and on repeating things to me, let me do the repetition, and then they'll feel like, yeah, you heard me. They will say yes. You then summarize what they've said and ask if you got it right. If they say yes again, then watch to see if they continue to repeat themselves. They will not. Sharp, sharp. Okay, this person repeating himself, and because he's repeating himself, it's going to take too long and just go on unendingly. So I'll take the conversation and say, okay, just to be sure that I got you, you said this, and if they say yes, or if they did not say it as clearly and I got something wrong, they're going to say, oh no, I did not say this. What I said was, so they clarify themselves, and in clarifying themselves gives me an opportunity to get right what they said and also echo back to them. Okay, so I think I got you right. You said instead that this. So I think it's good that way. The point is to make sure that they feel heard, to echo back what they said so that they feel heard. To resolve conflict, you only need to get each person to state their deepest, darkest thoughts, and then prove that each has heard what the other has said. This can be done verbally or in writing. I prefer the written method. So Mochary is all about the written method and just getting things into systems, like getting things written down so that it's easier for you to document. And I think I like that method too. I think it's going to be natural for me to use that method because I like documenting things. So, for example, doing this video, I like the fact that I'm doing this video and I've learned to use Loom a lot. Sometimes when I'm working on a document and I want to share a process with someone so that it's just there and this one doesn't have to ask me a question. Like recently I was on a project and there was a method that I used. We were all given the same task and there was a method that I used that proved to be very effective. So I decided to do a video and share it with others because after the first person asked me, how did I do mine? Somebody else came to ask me, how did you do yours? So I was just tired of repeating myself. By the second time another person asked me, so I said I'll just do a Loom video and I'll show you my method. You can then watch the video and whatever you questions you have after watching the video, I'll answer. And they actually didn't come back with any questions because they instead said, oh, thank you very much for sharing that video. It was very explanatory. So that's a good method. Just documenting things is really important. But it says write it down. People have grievances, let them write down what they say. I far prefer the written method as it takes about half the time requires almost no facilitation. It's easy to stay on script, and the action items that come out of it are impeccable agreements. Yeah, we treated impeccable agreements in chapter 13. Look, it's here. Chapter 13, impeccable agreements and consequences. Step one, ask each person to write down the deepest thoughts about the other person. So you go to a doc, open a doc, please give me access, like this Google Docs, and please give the facilitator access. On the doc, write 5 categories: anger, present, fear of the future, sadness, concern about the past, joy, present excitement or past excitement, and excitement that is sometimes usually futuristic. So you just have these 5 categories. In every major relationship, what we have feelings of anger, fear, sadness, joy, and excitement. When you think about the other person and you focus on the anger that you feel, what thoughts come to mind? Please state those thoughts in the following way. Feeling: I feel anger when dash. Fact: I saw you doing dash. This should only be what a video camera would have seen, no opinion, thought, or judgment, just as it is documented with evidence, of course. So, 3, story. The thought or judgment that I had was, which is what you took out of the feeling and the fact. So here is an example. Anger. I felt anger when you saw when I saw you walk by me the other day and didn't hear the word hello. The thought I had was that you purposely ignored me and thus were really saying screw you to me. As facilitator, look at both docs and make sure that they are filled out correctly. Encourage the separation of fact and judgment as much as possible. Make sure they are as specific as possible about the actions the other person did and how it made them feel. Realize that any conclusions, so make sure that any conclusions drawn, we are somewhere along here. Yeah, make sure there are no sweeping statements or values. Sorry. If one or both are reluctant to say anything, which is often the case, you supply the thoughts that you might have if you were in their shoes. Be dramatic, become an actor, get into the role, state the thoughts as explicitly as they would appear in your own mind. Use swear words. Ha. Okay, what's going on here? Let's take that again. If one or both are reluctant to say anything, which is often the case, okay, after writing down that is, you supply the thoughts that you might have if you were in their shoes, or be dramatic. Okay, so this reminds me of something it reminds me of something um, that Alex Omozi said recently, that someone walked into a luxury fashion shop and was angry over a button that was missing in their coat. And so the owner of the coat, this was when Alex Omozi was a kid and he was working in that store. The CEO, immediately the person came in and was grinding. The CEO just looked at Alex Omozi and smiled, and he just went around the corner of the office to go meet the person. And when he met the person, his countenance changed. So this person was angry. The customer was angry. There was my button was missing and all that. So the CEO of the company goes to meet the customer and took the button and said, impossible. You know, you just, it became dramatic instantly and said, oh, who was the person who attended to you? I'm going to deal with this right now. Oh, this is terrible. Did anybody ever see you wearing this coat? And so on and so forth. It just made the entire thing so dramatic that the customer looked at him and said, no, no, it's not that deep. It's okay. It's okay. So what he did was he took over the customer's perceived anger, or the anger the customer was displaying, and he took it to like 100%. Okay. And because of that dramatic effect, the customer then says, come on, man, it's not that deep. I wasn't even as angry as you are. So because of what he did, his own anger escalating at the moment, he the customer already feels calm. So what he did was he called somebody from the back office and gave the person, and he said, we're going to fix it right now. So that dramatic effect has the tendency to make people feel, the concerned person feel like, Wow, I wasn't even as angry as you are, because we all know, like in our deepest sense as human beings, we all know that anger is not the best way to express our emotions. But sometimes we get so emotional we cannot hold back our anger. So when we see somebody being overly or like being aggressive with their anger, or being too dramatic with their anger, even a more angry person on a normal day would be like, come on, man, like you need to calm down, you need to calm down. So that dramatic effect can have the tendency to help the concerned and should we say legitimately angry person, or the original person who is involved, to even cool their tempers. So the person will start to guide you. They are likely to say, that's close, but not quite it. The thoughts I have are more like, aha. So it's not exactly the same scenario, but you can see that if people do not speak, and you do like what Mochary saying I should do here, which is to become the dramatic person. Of course, I don't know about swear words, but I know I've used swear words a couple of times, but usually not when I'm relating with people. I might be watching something and I get so like I'm so shocked, or I read something and I'm by myself. Like I use swear words. I use a swear word, but I usually don't use swear words when I'm with other people. It's rare, and that thing must be either very shocking or exciting for me to use a swear word. So I don't endorse the swear words part, especially in a professional environment. I certainly don't want to use swear words when I'm talking with my CEO. It's bad for me. So no swear words for me, but we can do the dramatic part. So when they slow down and don't seem willing to go further, again, state the thoughts for them. Each time you do so, it allows them to go further. Do this until each person has written down their raw, unvarnished thoughts and around anger towards the other. Once they get that right, they can usually get through fear, sadness, joy, and excitement on their own. The point is to just get people to document their anger. I'm not sure about how to do dramatic thing in the document, because it doesn't say it here that this dramatic thing you want to do, if you should do it in writing. But since we're playing in documents, it might go to say that you should have um, that you should do that dramatic thing or this dramatic effect typing yourself, but I don't know if that really works. For me, I just prefer a more simpler method that, two people have access to the document, the two concerned people, and I tell them, we're going to solve this, but I need you have to document each of these things. You have to document each of these five things. So it's a lot better to resolve the issue. And of course, I've worked with, and I know that there are CEOs and managers and team leaders who would use their authority and say, if you do not document this thing, both of you would be suspended, given X, Y, and Z or so, and that might have the effect of calming people down. The alternative is to bring two people with the facilitator into a call and allow them take turns and air their grievances. The thing about it is that Mochary prefers it to be in writing, and I think it's in writing. It's also effective because it can easily be referred to as a way to resolve the issue. I think when things are in writing, it's very easy to create systems out of them. So now ask each participant to custom paste the joy and excitement sections to the top of the doc. For the person sharing their emotions and thoughts, it's hard to feel joy and excitement until they have first written down their thoughts around anger and fear. But when the recipient reads the doc, it is best for them to first see how the sharer actually has positive thoughts about the recipient. This validates the relationship and motivates the recipient to do what is needed to repair that relationship. Therefore, it is important for the recipient to read the thoughts around joy and excitement first. So they should be at the top. Let's just put it there. Okay, step two, person A, the person with less power in the relationship shares access to their doc with person B. Okay. Okay, so it's just became clear now. So we aren't working with one document at first. Open a doc, please give me the facilitator access. Okay, so you say each person, or ask each person to write down their deepest thoughts about the other person. So each person creates a document, write down their deepest thoughts about the other person. Yeah, that way. So then both of them will share access to their various documents, and the person A, the person with less power in the relationship, shares access to their doc with person B. Okay, then they share with each other. Person B reads person A's thoughts around joy and excitement about person B. Person B should simply say thank you to person A when she reads these thoughts. Person B then reads person A's first thoughts around anger and about person B. You, the facilitator, then follow the script. Facilitator asks person B, do you want to make person A feel anger and have these thoughts? Person B, no. If the answer is yes, then the two should not be in a relationship together. Uh, then that means that one will likely need to let go to be let go from the organization, regardless of the seniority. The person to be let go should usually be the person who wants the other to feel anger. That person will likely create toxic relationships with others as well, and eventually will have to leave the company anyway. So, point number three, facilitator to person A. What request do you have of person B? Person A, please do the following. If person B agrees, have person B write down the action item with their initials and the due date just below the fact or judgment of person A. The goal here is to co-create a plan so that misunderstanding and acrimony do not enter the relationship again. That's the point of this exercise, that you don't want to have it happen again. So it's not like this is something we're going to repeatedly do between both persons. So person A goes first, person B adds their thoughts. They go back and forth until they have agreed on a written plan. Verbal agreements are not impeccable. We we all understand words a little bit differently. To make this agreement impeccable, one of the participants writes down the plan and the other adds their initials plus and a plus one to note their agreement. And the plus one, I think, is going to be a third party, maybe the facilitator. Facilitator to person A, do you feel heard? Do you feel that person B wants to have a positive relationship with you? Person A, yes. If the answer is no, get curious and find out why. Repeat the steps above until the answer is yes. Do not move on to a second anger item yet. So there's a lot of back and forth around this. And I think the importance of this back and forth is to ensure the resolution. But after you have person A sharing their document with person B and you facilitating the relationship, in which case it's the facilitator could be me, the virtual assistant, the chief of staff sometimes. It could also be the CEO. It could also be the manager. Especially in small teams, the CEO might be responsible for that. Especially if the CEO directly hired all the people in a small team. So person B shares access to their doc with person A. Repeat the same script as in step two. Now, both person A and person B have affirmed that they want to have a positive relationship with each other, have accepted the feedback, and created an action item to resolve it. Step four, when the aha moment of understanding occurs, seal it with a physical connection, a hug, a handshake, a high five. So this method is important because up until this point, we've been talking about working with documents. Uh, okay, so one seal with a physical engagement. When step three is complete, there will usually be a moment of understanding and compassion for each other. When this moment occurs, seal it with a physical connection. If the two have hugged in the past, ask them to do so again now. If the most they have done in the past is shake hands or high five, then ask them to do that now. This physical connection symbolizes the new understanding and puts a capstone on the event. Step 5, ask each person for feedback on the process so that the process can improve, because we can, if it has worked for both of them, it can work for another set of people. What did they like that you as facilitator did? What did they wish you had done differently? Step 6, set a meeting for 1 to 2 weeks out between person A and person B and the facilitator. At the end of the meeting or at the meeting, confirm that both person A and B have completed their action items. This will prove to each other that there is a real desire for a positive relationship. Do steps 2 to 4 on the remainder. So this is a lot of back and forth in the documentation process. This can work within a day or so. I haven't tried it before, and I haven't been in an organization where this documentation process is used in conflict resolution, but I wouldn't be opposed to seeing it. I would be much more open, however, to seeing another simpler method than that. So, issue identification. There are 2 excellent ways that I know to encourage people to identify the key issues in the company that need to be solved. The first, 2 excellent ways. So let us take note, 2 excellent ways. The first, ask each person to imagine that they are the CEO and ask themselves the question, what are the most important issues, maximum of 3, for me to solve in the next 90 days? So I think this is role playing. Okay. So ask each person to imagine that they're the CEO and ask themselves the question. This is for issue identification. What are the most important issues, maximum of 3, for me to solve in the next 90 days? Allowing people permission to put themselves in the CEO role gives them permission to think like an owner. Because usually, if you own a business, you wouldn't want it to fail. So if you're looking at it as someone else's business, you might say, oh, worst case scenario, if this person doesn't make it work, I can leave to another company or maybe leave to go start mine. But if you see it as your own business or you have an ownership mentality in the business, uh, then you're most likely going to want the company to succeed. So that's why it's important. This method works because it's a role playing, it's a mental game. So in the next 90 days, each person just highlights the maximum of 3 things that they believe should be solved, or if they were the CEO, they would want to solve. So the second, just as people's fullest thoughts about someone can be drawn out by sourcing anger, fear, sadness, joy, and excitement, so too can someone's thoughts about the company. At every quarterly offsite that I facilitate, so it says here that he usually facilitates offsite meetings, I ask all team members to open a doc that only they have access to and write down their thoughts about the company when they source their joy. Okay, so what is it about a company that concerns them in these 5 ways? Joy, excitement, sadness, anger, and fear. For their thoughts of anger and fear, each person writes facts. Okay, this is what a video camera captured, story. These are thoughts and proposed solution. These should be very specific action items with directly responsible individuals and due dates. While they are doing that, I create a document with those headings and give access to all. Okay, so maybe this document will be used to curate all the responses on the issue. Okay, so I then ask everyone to copy and paste their writings. Okay, good. So he isn't curating it. The people will do so. Everybody has access. Then ask everyone to copy and paste their writings with no attribution. So they aren't attributing it. Um, of course, if you if you go to this place, I get the point where it makes about there shouldn't be an attribution, but if you come to this place, you have version history, and then you see version history. You can almost see what everybody will be doing, or everybody has been posting. The thing is though, if you have like a 100-person team and everyone is pasting their 5 point things in that three section method that he has templated, then you have like 100 people dropping things on that document. It's going to be almost ridiculous for you to say, I want to go and see version history to see what each person has said. You have to be deliberately looking for trouble to say you want to do that. But I wouldn't be surprised if someone does it. I then ask everyone to copy and paste their writings with no attribution under the correct heading in the group doc. We all read the doc. The writings of joy and excitement make us feel inspired and renew our feeling of group success. The writings of sadness allow us to feel bonded over shared loss. The issues/solutions posed in anger and fear give us and give us an issues roadmap to be unpacked and resolved by one by one over the course of the upcoming quarter. So for their thoughts of anger and fear, so this is only applicable to anger and fear. The fact, story, and proposed is only applicable to anger and fear. Not that each of these 5 items are going to have the fact, story, and proposed solution. So sorry if I said otherwise earlier. Okay, so it is a very simple and very effective exercise. I recommend that you do it with everyone in the company on a quarterly basis. So that is that on issues and conflict resolution. I think this was interesting, just looking at his documented approach, like his approach to documenting these things and using documentation to solve them. I think it's going to be very effective for an external person who is coming in, like you said, it was if he's an external facilitator of one of these sessions. I also think it's effective for the CEO because the CEO might when you have different people on the team, sometimes when you have a conflict between two people on your team, and these are not people who are performing exactly the same way. The person who is performing a lot better, whether they are junior or senior, that you know and that you're looking at their KPIs and you know they are doing very well, might be wrong, but because you like the fact that they are performing, you might just be tempted to take their side. It could be a natural thing, but documenting things this way removes the possibility that you'll be so biased because you're going to want people to follow through on the documentation process. So this is really interesting.